name is Rifki Berger, and I'm an occupational therapist who has worked for over 25 years with children, families, and in school settings. Here at Fun and Function, we're dedicated to helping children succeed through our sensory tools and educational programs. Our goal is to reach the wider community to educate teachers, parents, and therapists to recognize behaviors that are a sign of sensory processing difficulties and how they can help their children in the classrooms with those behaviors. We will describe how we experience the environment through our senses and will identify 8 important senses to understand how they impact our interactions and experiences. Together, we will learn to recognize that our senses provide sensory information as an important foundation for learning. We'll become sensory detectives. We'll learn to recognize different sensory profiles and identify strategies that we can use to support children's sensory needs. Today, we have students with a much wider range of needs entering our classroom. Some are eligible for special services, and some might not be. We may not be able to put our finger on it, but the diverse needs of our students are impacting our classrooms. And how? Let's take a trip in our heads to see what's going on. Think about this. Our physical brain is disconnected from the outside world. It sits inside our skulls and is completely dependent on our sensory systems to provide information. The brain itself never acts directly with the environment. Instead, our brains create our reality, personality, and behavior based on sensory information it receives through the various sensory systems. Sensory processing involves taking information from our environment as captured by our sensory receptors. We hear a friend calling our name. We see him running towards us with a ball and an inviting expression on our face. We understand that he wants us to join the game, and we run to join. Here are the 8 senses. They include 5 senses you're familiar with: sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, as well as 3 that may be new to you. Proprioception tells you the position of your body in space using receptors that are in your joints and muscles. One of the ways we use proprioception in the classroom is to be able to sit upright and knowing how to accurately reach for an object that we want to pick up from the desk or the floor. When proprioception is not working properly, a child may appear clumsy and bangs into objects, walls, or people. He may knock things over when trying to reach for them. The sensory system is not providing an accurate body map. This can be frustrating, especially when the glass of milk spills or the stack of paper goes flying. This is one of the ways that we see issues with proprioception. Our vestibular sense, our sense of balance, is controlled by receptors in the inner ear. We use information from the vestibular system on the school playground, when we climb on a ladder and swoosh down a slide. If our vestibular system is over-responsive, we'll be scared of these movements. If it is under-responsive, we'll want movement opportunities more and more. In a more subtle way, think about how your head moves in the classroom. A child has to look ahead at the board, then down to their paper to copy from the board, then back at the teacher who is explaining the instructions. Many different head movements. It might make this child feel the same way you would feel if you were nauseous on a boat. Interoception relates to our bodily function: hunger, thirst, feeling tired, needing to use the bathroom, and internal pain such as a sore throat or a stomach ache. We've all experienced how difficult it is to concentrate or learn when our bodies are telling us we're so hungry or thirsty. Children who feel immediate physiological needs are in no way ready or available to learn until their needs are met. A student that we think is trying to escape the class by going to the bathroom 10 times a lesson might just have a low tolerance for sensations in their bladder. Interoception will inform a child's emotional states, but they might not realize the connection. For instance, a child may feel anxious at the end of the day, not realizing that a snack is in order. The feeling of anxiety was triggered by hunger. Another foundational sense is the tactile system. The organ responsible for touch is the skin. Sensations from the skin are picked up by the different receptors embedded in our skin, and they travel along nerves. They're sent to the spinal cord for simple processing and then to the brain for more sophisticated processing, allowing us to identify the touch sensation and determine how to react to the sensation, especially if a motor response is required. For example, if something is hot, the motor response is to pull back. If something itches, you scratch. If an infant doesn't like touch and is always fussy when being held, the infant can have trouble forming a healthy attachment to their caregivers. The infant may be less interested in touching and manipulating basic learning tools like blocks. That same infant will grow up and go to school. That same tactile hypersensitivity will appear. They avoid interacting with everyday material such as crayons and glue. They may have trouble standing in line or sitting in a circle where they may be jostled by the other children. On the other end of the spectrum, children who barely register touch might not even feel you tapping their shoulder to get their attention. They may not register extremes of temperature and happily run outside on the coldest of days with just a t-shirt. After a fall, they may not notice that they've really scraped themselves and need to visit the nurse. These 4 foundational senses, proprioception, vestibular, interoception, and tactile, mostly work for us on a subconscious level. We don't even have to think about these senses. They do their work in the background. To summarize, vestibular refers to the sense of balance and movement. Proprioception is our sense of body position, also called body maps. Interoception refers to information we get from our internal organs. These and the sense of touch are our foundational senses. Think about the sensory processes we're experiencing right now. First, we're using our senses of vision and hearing to pay attention to this video. We see the images on the screen and hear my voice. If we're taking notes, our proprioception is telling us about our body's position and letting us know how far away the paper is and where to place our hands so the writing is aligned. We're also using tactile receptors that tell us how hard to grasp our pen. We might be smelling and tasting the coffee we poured using our sense of smell and taste. Our brain also determines where to pay attention. Despite the warm breeze and the birdsong outside, it decides to pay attention to this video. We process the sounds. Different areas of the brain need to tell you what information to write, how to spell it, monitor your pen on the paper visually, and use motor schemes to move your hand muscles. It's so complex and amazing. We need to appreciate sensory processing to truly understand how our students learn and behave and grow into healthy people. To understand children's sensory needs, we have to think about how we process sensory information. We can think about sensory processing as a delivery truck. We use a truck to get things from point A to point B, just like we use the neural pathways to get information from the environment to the brain. Once the raw material, in this case sensory input, is delivered to the brain, the truck can take the products that are made back to the environment. This product is our reaction in the form of an action or emotion to the sensory input. For most of our students, the process works well and the traffic on the neural highway is flowing. But for some of our students, the traffic gets jammed. When the traffic is jammed, students experience difficulty learning and relating to others. Using this model, we can also understand that sensory processing issues can be inconsistent, just like when traffic jams occur during certain times of the day, and perhaps not on the weekends. For example, our student might handle noise in the classroom very well in the morning, but by the afternoon, he's overwhelmed and is no longer able to filter out and manage the noise. This can trigger anxiety and challenging behavior. We need to help him cope with the noisy, overstimulating environment, and we're going to learn how. It's important to recognize that a traffic jam means something is wrong with the process. Nothing is wrong with the truck or the road. It's just a traffic jam. When we talk about sensory processing issues, we're talking about children who have issues with the process, not something doctors can see on a CT scan or MRI. If a child is blind, she can't use the sense of vision, but this is not considered a sensory processing issue. Let's illustrate how a deficit in one of the senses might occur. Take a look at this slide. Can you read it? How about now? Isn't that better? Think for a moment, what would it be like if everything we experience was like the first fuzzy slide? How well would we perform in school? Would we be a safe driver? Would we be able to follow a recipe? Sometimes, when a student experiences a learning activity or a social interaction in a blurry manner, like the slide we just viewed, we might interpret his reaction by thinking he just isn't trying hard enough, or he isn't paying attention. In this video series, we're going to consider an alternate point of view. This quote is by Dr. Ross Greene. He wrote The Explosive Child, where he said, "Kids do well if they can." This quote reminds us that all children want to succeed. Our job is to help each child succeed by providing the just right environment. We can do that in part by understanding sensory processing and its impact on behavior, social interaction, and learning. If we focus the behavior of children through a sensory lens, we might be able to address their challenges so that they can do well and learn. Then children will do well in our classrooms. Doesn't that sound great? Just to be clear, we're not here to diagnose our students who have sensory differences, but to better understand how they function so that we can help them cope. Just like we cope when the day gets to be too much for us. Sometimes we call it unwinding. Some of us go to the gym on the way home. Others might listen to classical music in the car. Some of us use a shower before bedtime to relax, and others use it as a quick way to wake up in the morning. All of these are sensory preferences, and we have to recognize that our students have them too. As we gain skills in recognizing sensory differences, we benefit from realizing that we're all unique. We have our own sensory preferences, and we have our own ways to cope. We can also share that perspective with our students. We will be learning a lot that will make the school experience much better for students with sensory challenges and give ourselves the skills to assess student behavior and respond appropriately. We still have a lot more to learn, so please join me for our next video lesson.